Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I am so happy that you are here. I am so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of Steven Robards at the hands of his own 16-year-old daughter, Marie. Marie Robards was 16 years old. She was popular. She was the top of her class. She was strikingly beautiful, and she had the dreams of reuniting with her mother. But instead of asking for help when she felt like she was trapped, she turned to poison. When her father died suddenly, no one suspected the quiet, book-smart teen to have anything to do with it until over a year later, when a tearful confession to a friend cracked the case wide open. Now, what could drive a teenage girl to want to murder her father, and how did she almost get away with it? That's what we're going to be discussing today. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. But before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Aura. Have you ever wondered why you get these spam emails from companies you've never heard of, or calls or texts from phone numbers that just seem not quite right? Well, that is because there are these things out there called data brokers, and data brokers are making billions, with a B, billions of dollars by taking your personal and private information and selling it to people like that you really don't want to have it, okay? Like marketers and scammers. Scammers. Now, I've got good news for you and I've got bad news for you, okay? The good news. Data brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to, which sounds great, but here's the bad news. They make the process of removal super difficult and confusing on purpose, and that's one of the ways in which Aura comes in to help you. Aura can help you remove your information from all of these sites. And look at just how many of these different sites can have your information. Like, I don't know who Old Phone Book is, but they have my information without my permission. And Aura helps me remove my information from these sites and helps me keep it off. They do the hard work so I do not have to. And that's not all they do. Aura is all-in-one digital security. You can get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You can get time fraud alerts for credit and banking. You can get a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And if anything does happen, because, life does find a way, Aura has US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. So you get all the online protection you could ever want or need all in one place, and that's why I personally recommend Aura. I don't want to leave myself vulnerable and exposed, and I have to imagine you don't either. So if all of this sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link in my description box. It's aura.com/BRATTERSTEIN to try Aura for free for 14 days and see if your private and personal information has been leaked online. And if it has, let Aura help you put a stop to it today. So now I just want to say a big thank you to Aura for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Aura that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. So with all that said, today I'm going to tell you the entire story of the murder of Steven Robards. I read all the things that you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case. But of course, I want you to answer once you have something to go on, okay? But the question of the day is this. Do you think that Marie Robards intentionally murdered her father? Do you think that this was something that she did on purpose? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below because I am curious to hear what you have to say. And now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of Steven Robards at the hands of his own daughter, Marie. So, who was Marie? That's the question here. Prior to the events of this case, she was said to be a good kid. She didn't get in trouble. She had good grades. She did super well in school. She was already writing in cursive by, I believe it was the first grade. She participated in extracurricular activities. She won her district's university interscholastic league competition in keyboarding. She played clarinet in the school band and took dance lessons and art lessons. She kept herself busy, and again, she stayed out of trouble. She also had, quote, strong values in every other area of her life. For example, she made a pledge to herself, something she thought was very important, that she was going to be she's going to remain pure, be a virgin until she was married, which was something that she put a great deal of value in. That was very important to her. And this is despite the fact that she was beautiful enough to pretty much get any guy she could have wanted. And in addition to being beautiful, she was talented, she was smart, she was well-liked, popular, mature, all of these things. And now she was being referred to as the Texas Lizzie Borden. So, Dorothy Marie Robards was born on July 10th, 1976, and she was the only child to her parents, Beth and Steven. These two were high school sweethearts. the two married when they were fresh-faced adults. Okay, they were barely legal, and Steven had actually just joined the Navy. So the first couple of years that they were married, they bounced around a lot. They didn't have like a place that they called home, which I feel like is something that a lot of people from military families can absolutely relate to. But anyways, he did a 4-year tour, which took the family to San Diego. And from there, they ended up going to Florida. And this is where they had a little bit of stability, where they kind of settled down into married life. They ended up getting pregnant. They had their one and only daughter. This was Dorothy Marie Robards, who went by Marie. And after Steven was able to get out of the Navy, like once he had completed his obligations that made it okay for him to like piece out of that situation, the family moved to settle down in Texas. Now, it was after being in Texas for a little bit of time, after he was out of the Navy, after they were settling into being man and wife and having a baby, that they started to really have problems. I mean, they always kind of had problems because they got together super young, and they kind of just got together because they both thought the other was hot. And now that was, I don't want to say they were less hot, because I don't know if they were less hot to each other, but there was definitely more things to focus on than just how attracted you were to your partner, right? They're now settling into actual married life. They're not bouncing around from place to place. They're seeing each other more often. They're also dealing with the very hard reality of what being a parent is. And things were just coming into focus. They were becoming less manageable. They had less emotional bandwidth to be able to deal with each other's the things about each other that they didn't particularly like, but that they could kind of ignore before, because now every bit of your like mental and emotional stability is going towards taking care of your kid. You know what I mean? I think as parents we do. So every other thing that anybody else does, it's like, I don't have time for this because all my time's going into this. So they had less internal battery to deal with each other. And that was just in general, not to mention dealing with any emotional instabilities that either of them may have been dealing with, which we will discuss further. And it just seemed like within time, they just were not happy in this relationship anymore. And Beth later said of this, and I quote, "Steven's behavior had always been a little erratic, but I was a naive Catholic girl caught up in a whirlwind teenage romance with this suave guy. But there came a point where I didn't know how to act around him anymore. He became jealous. He had temper tantrums. He couldn't hold on to a job. And there were times when he would get so tired and feel everything was so bleak and dark that nothing was worthwhile." Now, we now know that Steven was suffering from undiagnosed depression and unaddressed depression, and that's why he was going through such a hard time and why he was so hard to deal with, because back then they just didn't really know what was going on and they didn't know how to fix it, so they were just kind of suffering through it, and it was very damaging to their relationship, to say the least. So all of that is to say, in 1980, when Marie would have been around 3 years old, the couple did separate. They ended up getting divorced. And once the two did separate and get divorced, Marie stayed primarily with her mother. I mean, at this time, Steven was struggling, right? We've already discussed this. Like, he was already going through depression, so the divorce definitely didn't help with that. And now that he didn't have a constant adult in his life to keep him accountable and keep him kind of tethered to earth, he just kind of suffered for a bit, and he floated out into the world, and he kind of had to find himself. He did end up getting his own apartment and taking care of himself, but he was working so hard and just kind of taking care of himself that in these early years, he wasn't very present for Marie, and reportedly only saw her like once or twice a month. Now, that's just in the beginning, because with time, this did change. With time, Steven got to a point where he was able to take care of himself. He prioritized his mental wellness, knowing that, he needed to be the best version of himself to be able to be there and be present with his daughter. He started getting medication, like he got diagnosed. He started taking medication to help regulate his emotions, and he seemed to be doing a lot better. He even ended up getting himself a girlfriend. He started dating this woman who, her name was Sandra, and they met at a Parents Without Partners meeting, which sounds adorable and also sounds like a breeding ground for bad men, if I'm honest, because from all the things that I've read, ladies, be careful. I'm not saying all men are bad, but I'm just saying predators prey on single moms. But that aside, because that's a whole different conversation, they met at one of these meetings, which was very, very sweet sounding if you take out what I just said. And they actually lived in the same apartment complex too, so it was like a very ideal romantic situation, a very cute meet cute. He also got himself a job that was very stable. He started working for the Postal Service, like the USPS, not the band. And this was a job that he really, really enjoyed. It let him be outdoors and let him be outside and in the fresh air. And it was just something that he felt like he could be very proud of. Now, as for Beth, Steven had his new girlfriend. Beth also moved on and got a new partner. She actually married a man named Frank. And Frank was also in the Navy, come to think of it. And so she clearly had a type. And actually, it's a little... I don't want to say that there's a gray area here, but it made people kind of go like, interesting, because Beth had actually met Frank through Steven, kind of, because when they were in Florida while he was in the Navy, she met Frank because he was in the Navy as well as her husband. And reportedly there was nothing going on. There was no affair. They were just friends, but clearly they must have thought the other was at least a little hot, right? Considering they ended up married and they kept in contact with each other after the fact. But according to both of them, there was no overlap. They were both married at the time that they met. So they just met while both being married to other partners, and then both just happened to be separated from their partners and then married each other. So anyways, by the time that Beth and Steven got separated, Frank had also separated from his wife. He had also moved from Florida to Texas, which is where Beth now was, and he had gotten a job as a cop. And in addition to, her finding him attractive and all of that, he also had his own kid too, so he understood what comes with being a parent, because I cannot imagine, now that I have a kid, if me and my husband separated for whatever reason, being with somebody who didn't have a kid, being with somebody, period, first off, but being with somebody who didn't have a kid, no, thank you. But for her, this was serendipity. Now, Frank was said to have easily stepped into the role of a father figure to Marie. I mean, he had been there since she was little. She was just 4 years old when he came into the picture, and he was said to fill that role very well. He was said to be good to her and that she liked him, and that she called him dad, and that she called her biological dad Steven dad, which I don't know how I feel about that, but things seemed to be good, at least in the beginning. Now, at the same time that Steven was getting his life together and getting in this relationship with Sandra and getting the job and everything, Sandra or Sandra? I'm going to go back and forth on that. But anyway, during the time that his life is going well, Beth and Frank's relationship starts to sort of crumble, okay? So they already have their fair share of issues that they're trying to work through. We'll talk about some of them later, but they couldn't really focus on the issues they had just between them as a couple that they needed to focus on because they had a point of contention in their relationship, and this was Marie. By this time, she was a teenager, and those teenage/preteen girl hormones were hormoning, or at least that's how it was perceived by Frank. But I mean, they were probably hormoning a little bit. We've all been there if we're girls. Now, Marie did seem to have an issue with her mother's marriage. She did see a psychologist. I think it might have been after she was arrested. I can't say for sure, but the doctor basically said that he got the impression that Marie was jealous of the relationship that she had with Frank and kind of felt like Frank was stealing her mother away from her. And this was very hard for her because she and her mother were very close. They weren't just mother and daughter, but they were also like best friends. They were loving with each other. They were affectionate with each other. They would finish each other's sentences. And the relationship they had felt more like they were sisters who grew up together than mother and daughter. Beth loved Marie and was super proud of her, and she openly talked about how lucky she got with having such a fantastic and smart daughter. And it's thought that this was something that also made Frank a little jealous because he was also jealous of the relationship between mother and daughter. So that's awkward, right? For him to be jealous of their relationship, for Marie to be jealous of their relationship. Like, you can have separate relationships with people and love them equally but differently. Well, I don't think you would love like a husband as much as you love your kid, but there's no reason for the jealousy. Just be happy that the person you love has other people to love and other people to love them. But all that is to say is there was definitely some tension between Frank and Marie. And even though he had been there for basically her entire life, they never got this like deep father-daughter bond that you would sort of expect that would happen from that much exposure. So that's not good, but it's going to get worse because we're about to fast forward a little bit, okay? We're fast forwarding specifically to the weekend before Marie would have turned 16 years old. Okay, she comes home, already not like particularly enjoying Frank, having some tension with him. Things aren't good. Then she comes home and she finds him banging another chick. She reasonably pissed off, and she's like, okay, you know what? F this guy. I'm going to go tell my mom. She's going to tell him. We're done. We're out. And she thought for sure that this was going to be the end of Frank's relationship with her mother, and that it was now just going to be the two of them, and that her life was going to be perfect. Okay. But that's not exactly how things went down. Beth didn't want to leave Frank. And in addition to not wanting to leave him, she wasn't even that, I wouldn't say she wasn't mad at him, but she felt sort of responsible for the fact that he cheated. She said for Frank to have done something like this to her, he must have been feeling very neglected by her because she was so busy working in the emergency room at a hospital. So he was neglected, and this was his way of sort of acting out about that. So that's what she said. And he later said of his behavior and the results of these actions that he had taken, that he chose to take, quote, "At the time, I failed my family as a father and as a husband. I caused grief. Marie had lost respect for me because of what I had done." So, yeah, Beth felt responsible. he took responsibility in some ways, but he didn't really. And we'll get into that later. But that's basically what happened. And so Marie went into this really excited, thinking her mom was going to end this relationship that she didn't really want her mom to be in anymore. But instead, Beth was very quick to forgive her husband. And Marie, who was still living there, was not so quick to forgive her stepfather. Let's just say that. Now, she already had her reasons not to like Frank, not to respect Frank. And now she had a big one. She had a valid one that she could hold on to and hold over his head and basically have a perfect excuse for her to tell him to go fuck himself. So from that point on, she didn't listen to him. She was outwardly defiant. She was disrespectful. She was just like, I'm not listening to a thing you say. You are not my father. You're just some guy who cheated on my mother. Marie literally went to her mother and begged her to divorce Frank. She said she couldn't imagine living in the house with a man that she didn't respect and a man who clearly didn't respect her best friend, her mother. And Beth just basically told her, like, I'm not ending my relationship. I don't want to get a divorce. I want to make this work. And Marie told her, like, if this is your choice, if this is what you're going to do, I can't be here to watch it anymore. So she wanted to move out. And Beth respected her decision. She's like, okay, if you don't want to live here anymore, if you can't accept the fact that I love him and I think things are going to get better, I will let you leave. And so she went as far as arranging for Marie to move in with her grandparents who lived 45 minutes away in Fort Worth. So Marie moved there. She went to Fort Worth. She enrolled in a new school with hopes of things just getting better day to day. But she really didn't give it a chance. She was there less than a week before she regretted her decision and decided she wanted to go home. She was so determined to do that she used all the money that she saved up. It was about $50, and she paid to get a cab home. Now, it does seem to me that this girl makes some rash decisions, because can you imagine being a parent and going through all the work to get your child moved to a new place? I mean, you arrange with the grandparents, you talk to them, everything's set up. You even enroll her in a new school, and within a week, she's like, just kidding. I know you did all that work, but I'm back. But that's what happened. And this next part is going to be something that really affected Marie negatively. And it's because she wasn't going to be welcomed back home with open arms. Basically, when Frank and Beth got together, they had a house rule. This was Frank's rule, but it was one that Beth agreed with and adopted. And basically what it was is that since they were a blended household, right? They were both a mother and a father who both had a kid, Marie and Frank. Frank had a son. Since they both had kids who were in their household, who both had parents in other households, they made it a rule that if their kids decided to move out because they were unhappy with the living conditions, they couldn't come back afterwards. They needed to really think about their decision and decide if they wanted to move out, because they didn't want their kids to be able to use the threat of going to live with another parent as a bargaining chip to get their way when things weren't going their way, or to just move and live with whatever parent was suiting them at that moment to get whatever they wanted. Prior to Marie leaving to live with her grandparents, Frank's son had made the same choice. He had wanted to leave. He moved out. He went to be with his mother. And then after some time, he decided he wanted to come back. But when he asked to come back, his father told him no. He would not let his own son move back in with him. So now here's Marie taking this cab ride home. And when she gets home, she's told, you cannot move back in with us. You knew the rules. You left, and you have to stay gone. And this went about as well as you can imagine it going. And Beth later said of this night when Marie showed up back at home, quote, "It was a terrible scene, all of us outside screaming and crying at one another. Marie was crying for me to take her back, and Frank was shouting at me, 'You know the rule and you can't break it.' The same thing that applied to my son should apply to her. He was making sense, I know, but it felt like he was making me choose between him and her." Now, you'll have to let me know if you're a parent how you feel about that particular rule and how hard you would stick to it. I don't know if I would have the heart to not take my kid back, especially, I just don't know if I'd be able to do it. I don't think I would have that rule. I understand the idea of the rule, but it in practice sounds harsh to me. Maybe like a 3 strikes and you're out thing, like something, I don't know. It just seems very, very difficult and very hard. I don't know what I would do. You have to let me know down below. I don't think I could do it. And truth be told, it doesn't seem like Beth really wanted to do it either. So since Marie wasn't allowed to come home, mostly because of Frank's rule, but also because Beth was agreeing to follow this rule as well, she sat down and she decided, okay, if you can't stay here, you don't want to be with your grandparents, let's call your dad. So she called Steven and she asked him how he would feel about Marie going and living with him like full time. And he was all for it. He was stoked. He wanted an opportunity to get closer with his daughter. And for Beth, she kind of thought that this might be temporary. That's what she was hoping for. She was hoping that with some space and perspective, she could get her husband to change his mind. She said that at the time that it happened, everything was so heated and intense and everybody was fighting. So everybody just needed a little time to cool down. But she truly believed that she would get Frank to change his mind and Marie would come back. Which just goes to show that maybe she should have put her foot down and let her stay. But I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know. But the bottom line about this is it just kind of makes me sad. I feel kind of sad for Beth. I feel sad she was cheated on. I feel sad that she was in the type of relationship where she didn't feel like she could undermine her husband's decisions, even if it was something she didn't feel particularly comfortable with. You know, especially considering this was her daughter and like he had been there a lot of her life, but it was her daughter at the end of the day. And I don't know, it just makes me frustrated. But this was also a different time, different relationship. He was a very traditional man. So in his mind, the men sort of ran the household. He was also a cop. So authority was like in his blood. And this was also the 90s. So it was just different. Now for Marie, this was the worst thing that could ever happen to her. This was her worst case scenario. She was kicked out of her home, her family home that she had lived in all her life with her mother, that she was like best friends with. And to go with her father that she didn't, well, she knew him better now because, you know, they were talking at this point, but she hadn't grown up with him, you know what I mean? Not the way she had with her mother. So this was impossible. And for her to be kicked out because her mother was agreeing with Frank, of all people, for her mother to agree with Frank and give Frank another chance when he had cheated on her, but to not give her another chance when she had just decided to move out and wanted to come back less than a week later was very upsetting for her and very difficult to grapple with. She just didn't understand. She truly seemed to believe that Frank was relieved to have her gone. She believed that her constant presence and her friendship with her mother was, quote, hindering Frank from putting his marriage back together with Beth. So there's that. But let's go back to Steven. When Steven finds out his daughter is going to come live with him, he is pumped, dude. He is so excited about the opportunity to get close to her and to get to know her in a different way. His life had been improving so much in like the years leading up to this with like his job and his girlfriend. So now this was just like the icing on the cake. So almost immediately upon learning that his daughter was going to be coming to live with him, he went out and he started apartment hunting. He's like, I got to get a bigger space so that she is comfortable. He wanted to make sure that his daughter, Marie, had a place to call her own, a place with privacy. He wanted to make sure that his home felt like home to her. But the thing is, those things were going to take time and Marie was going to need somewhere to go now. So in the meantime, she was there at his home. She was sleeping on a roll-away bed, like a roll-out bed in the dining room. And that was just one of many things that made this living situation seem like hell to her. She hated that she was there. She hated the home. She hated her new school. It was too big. She hated her dad's apartment. It was too small. And she just didn't like living with him because the way he lived was so differently than what she was used to. I mean, this was a guy. Do I need to say more? He, lived a different way. He didn't have all the things that she needed. He didn't even have the kind of utensils that she was used to working with. What utensils were missing, I can't say for sure. Maybe he had no wooden spoons for cooking. And she said that he didn't like clean enough for her liking, which as a woman, I could say, I think that most of us women would agree that most men do not clean enough for our liking. I'm not saying all men for my male watchers, because I know there are some of you. Very small percentage, but I do see that there are some of you. I'm not dogging you. If you are a very good cleaner, please let me know down below because I don't know any. I went off on a tangent though. Marie, very unhappy, constantly writing her mom letters, constantly calling her mom, complaining, and just begging to come home. It got so bad that at one point, Marie even expressed to her mother that she was suicidal, and her mom just immediately shut that down, told her to stop, told her that life was too precious for her to be acting that way. But Beth said she never took her daughter seriously. She didn't think she was serious about being so upset that she was suicidal. She just thought that her daughter was being over dramatic the way teenagers sometimes are. That Steven could sense that his daughter was unhappy, and it made him super upset and anxious. He wanted nothing more than to just please her. He would, take her out to restaurants. He would take her out to the movies. He would do everything he could to make her feel safe and appreciated and loved, but she didn't feel any of that. She didn't see all the effort he was putting in. She just saw what he lacked. And so she was constantly upset, constantly crying, again, begging mom to come home. And every time her mom just told her that she couldn't. So she just had to accept that this was her life and adjust. And after a couple of months, it seemed like she had. Marie started doing better in school. She started making straight A's again and being in the top 2 or 3% of students. She also warmed up to her father and her father's girlfriend, Sandra, even offering to wrap Christmas presents together. She stopped fighting as much at home. She had made some friends. She was seen as bright and bubbly and friendly. And though those who knew her knew she really wanted to be back at home with her mother, she did seem to be making the best out of the cards that she was dealt. But that was on the surface. On the inside, it was no better. She was still incredibly unhappy and incredibly determined to figure out how she was going to get to go home to be with her mother. And she was planning to do this by any means necessary. She had even fantasized about the idea of burning down her father's apartment complex. Okay? She thought, hey, if I burn down the apartment complex, then there is nowhere for me to live. And if there's nowhere for me to live, my mother will be forced to take me back. That's crazy work right there. Marie felt trapped. And again, she was kind of an impulsive person. So she thought about doing these things without thinking about the implications of such action. She just thought about what she could get about it. Just thought about what she could get out of doing something like that, but didn't consider the consequences, like displacing, put aside that you could accidentally kill somebody, okay, but displacing all of those families who also live in that apartment building and burning down their entire lives and all of their belongings and having them all have to start over. She didn't think about that. But thankfully, she didn't go through with this plan. She thought that it was too large scale, that she would definitely get caught and get in trouble. So she wanted to come up with something smaller, something less traceable, something that was serious enough that her mother would be forced to take her back home, but something that was small enough that it wouldn't be linked to her. She wouldn't get in trouble. So naturally, she came up with the plan that she would poison her father and try to make it look like an accident. So with that, we're going to move forward to February 18th, 1993, and it's this night that Steven and Marie sat down for dinner. They had gone and picked up Mexican food and brought it home to eat, which sounds so good right now. But that aside, they sit down, they eat their food, and afterwards, Steven goes to a nighttime midweek church service, okay? He goes to that. And while there, he starts to get very aggressive stomach pains. Like he gets a really bad stomach ache to the point that he actually leaves. He gets home like an hour after he left. So with the driving and all that, he very quickly turned around. And once he got home, he just started like violently vomiting. It got so bad that Marie was like, oh shit. And she ran over to Sandra's apartment. Because remember, they're like neighbors in the same apartment complex. She got there. She told Sandra what was going on. And then Marie stayed at Sandra's apartment listening to music with Sandra's son. And Sandra ran over to see what was going on with her boyfriend, with Steven. And when she got there, she saw that he was in terrible shape. When she got there, she found that he was lying in his bed and he told her that his legs and arms were stiff and that he couldn't swallow. So he was like drooling. So she was like, oh, there's something seriously wrong here. So she calls 911 and his condition was deteriorating so fast that while she was literally on the phone with the operator, she witnessed him getting worse. She heard like the sound of him gurgling. So she turned and she looked at him, and what she saw was that he was no longer just drooling, but he was like foaming at the mouth and his eyes were open and just staring, but he wasn't really looking at anything. She was in shock. Her body started heating up just at looking at this because there's nothing she could do but sit there and watch this and wait for first responders. Now, by the time the paramedics got there, Steven was unconscious. He was actually not breathing and had fallen into a coma. And because he wasn't breathing, they quickly tried to get him oxygen, but they couldn't even get the oxygen tube down his throat because it was so swollen. His throat was literally swollen closed, which explains why he couldn't swallow and why he was drooling and like foaming. So while the majority of this had happened, Marie was over at Sandra's house, but after some time when Sandra didn't come back, Marie walked over to see what was going on. And when she walked in, she saw this scene that I just described to you. And she didn't say anything. She just stood there and watched. And she did appear to have gone into shock. And when Sandra looked over and saw her in that condition, she like grabbed her and pressed her face into her shoulder so Marie wouldn't have to stand there and watch her father die. Now, Steven was loaded into an ambulance and the EMTs did everything they could to try to revive him, but they couldn't do anything. And by the time he got to the hospital, he was past the point of no return. And shortly thereafter, he died, and his cause of death was listed as a heart attack. And man, his poor girlfriend having to witness that, she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe he was gone. She couldn't believe that he had gotten so sick so fast to the point of death. He was literally just 38 years old and was said to have died of a heart attack. And I am 37, and that's terrifying and insane. It makes me feel like I need to eat like a handful of spinach immediately. But we know that it wasn't actually a heart attack. But at the time that he died, this is what they came up with. And the reason they came to this determination is because when they did his autopsy, they found that his heart, Steven's heart at the time he died, was enlarged. It was about 25% larger than it should have been for a man his age. And while the doctor did acknowledge that like it was rare for a man his age to die and have the conditions that he did with the enlarged heart and to die that way, it seemed like the most likely thing to have happened, and there was nothing else that pointed to anything else. So that was just his cause of death, a heart attack. Now, it does always seem crazy to me that in these situations that somebody's cause of death could be listed as something when that's literally not how they died. But then again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know how things work. And I'm coming from the privileged position of knowing he was poisoned. So I'm like, what the hell? What the hell, bro? It wasn't a heart attack. So I don't know. But at the time, they didn't know, right? They didn't know that he had been poisoned. And I kind of knew this. Like, I knew this in an abstract sort of way, but didn't really understand the fact that, like, when somebody dies, at least then, I don't know if it's changed now. Maybe. You'll have to let me know down below if you are a doctor. I don't think doctors are watching me, but you know what I mean. They didn't check for all these poisons, right? They don't check for all of these poisons in a person when they die unless there's like signs that point to the fact that they may have been poisoned. And apparently, at least back then, in order to check for the specific poison he was poisoned with, they would need a very expensive piece of machinery to do this. This was something that would have cost like $150,000 back then in 90s money. I don't know how much that is now, but a lot. If you know the conversion, let me know. And so they didn't have that, so they didn't test for it. And there was nothing that was odd enough about Steven's death for them to feel like they needed to like send it off to test it elsewhere. So they just didn't. And since they didn't, Marie got what she wanted, because the night that Steven died, her mother Beth and her mother's husband Frank showed up at the hospital and took Marie home. And bro, you know what's so fucked up here, besides all the things that are obviously like super messed up, is that, okay, so 4 days after Steven was killed, they had his funeral, which was obviously a very sad situation. This is a 38-year-old dude who just died out of nowhere, and people are like, what the hell? And like super solemn. Marie seems super just shocked by the whole situation, but she's about to get even more shocked because Beth obviously was at this funeral. This was her ex-husband. This was her child's father. So she's there. Frank was not, though. Or maybe he was, I don't know. But while at the funeral, Beth goes to her daughter and they start talking. And she tells her daughter that she, Beth, is leaving Frank, that things weren't getting better between the two of them, so she didn't want to be with him anymore. So Beth tells her she's ending her marriage, that she has a job opportunity in Florida, and that she's going to take this job opportunity, and that she's going to be taking Marie with her to Florida. Now, the reason this is so shocking is because this isn't like a quick thing that happens, right? It would take time to get this job opportunity and to consider it and to decide to move and look up places in Florida. So this is something that had been in the works for a while. So Marie tells her, like, you've been planning to do this for a while, to just take me to Florida, knowing that her mother had just told her about it 4 days too late. And Beth later said, like, man, if I had just told her a week sooner, none of this would have happened. I got chills through my body. Because it's true. If Marie had known that her mom was planning to take her away from her father and to be with her mom again, she wouldn't have killed her father. It's just like, life, man. Damn. Choices. Make good ones. So anyways, Beth and Marie, they moved to Florida and they end up in Panama City. And Beth started a job as an administrative assistant at the State Division of Motor Vehicles. And Marie was enrolled in yet another school. But this time, man, she was really going through it. She was not handling the stress and, I don't know, maybe the guilt of killing her father very well. She was super depressed. She had trouble even getting out of bed in the morning. It's like she finally got everything she wanted, but it's such a huge cost. Now, Beth saw what was happening with Marie, saw the depression, saw that she wasn't excelling at school how she used to. And she did chalk it up to, normal depression and normal grief that she would be feeling at the loss of her father, right? But she also had a reasonable amount of concern that this could be something more, because she knew that Steven suffered with mental health issues. So she thought that it was possible that Marie could have inherited these mental health issues from her father. So when Marie didn't improve and was really in this slump of time in her life after doing something so terrible, but her mom didn't know about that, she did get her to a therapist and wanted to give her daughter the opportunity to try to talk through everything she was feeling. But unfortunately, this just didn't really seem to help her. So that's bad, but then things are going to get worse, dude. You're not even going to believe this, okay? A few months after they made the trip to Florida, guess who shows up in Florida? Frank. Frank comes to Florida. He goes to Beth's work and he's like, hey, girl, I love you. I want to make this work. And Beth, who really wanted the opportunity to make things work with her husband, who she still loved, agreed to take him back and give him another chance. She really thought that he was going to work harder on making their relationship a priority. Now, when Beth came to Marie and told her this was happening, that Beth was going to be giving Frank another chance, Marie seemed to be supportive. She seemed like she was going to be okay with this. She seemed like she was going to give Frank the opportunity to make amends with her mother. And basically, she seemed like she wasn't going to be a huge shit to Frank like she had been before. But then again, it's so fucking frustrating. Then again, it turns out that Frank was all talk and no action, or rather, too much action, if you know what I'm saying. Because shortly after Beth decided to give him another chance, Marie, why she was messing with their pillows, I can't say, but she finds this letter that was written to Frank or from Frank. It was basically a letter that outlined the fact that Frank was still carrying on an affair, even though he had moved to Florida to make things up with his wife. And Marie found this stuff into his pillowcase. Like, bro. Now, with that, Marie was done. She found what she had found. She took it to her mother and she told her that she couldn't take this anymore. She couldn't be in this situation anymore. She had been acting like she was fine, but she wasn't. She didn't like Florida. She missed Texas and wanted to go back to Texas and wanted her mother to leave Frank and go back to Texas with her. But she was willing to go with or without her mother, which seems insane to me, considering she did all she did to be with her mother. And Beth, she decided to stay. She wanted to stay in Florida. She wanted to stay with Frank. She wanted to try to make her marriage work. So she sent her daughter to live with her grandfather. This was her grandfather, Jim, who lived in Mansfield, Texas. And if that sounds familiar, it's because Mansfield is where Adrienne Jones, the girl who we talked about last week, lived and was murdered. So if you didn't see last week's video, you should watch that, because it's, one, I think my longest video, and two, so fucked up and insane. So anyways, Marie's going to live with her grandpa, Jim, who is her father, Steven's father. So she murders her father, then chooses to go and live with her father's father. And she made this choice. She could have lived with Beth's side of the family, but she chose Grandpa Jim. She called him and asked him herself if she could go. And it's believed that she did this because she was feeling guilty and she wanted to make up for what she had done by taking his child, by being the best granddaughter she could possibly be. Then it does seem like she was struggling with the guilt of what she had done to her father. So she's living with Jim, who is Steven's dad. So obviously Steven comes up from time to time. That's the thing that they have in common. But Marie refused to talk about him. She didn't want to talk about him whenever he was brought up. She wouldn't go to visit his grave. She said that all of it was just way too emotional for her. Even on the anniversary of her father's death in February of 1994, her grandpa took her, Marie, and her friend Stacy, who we're going to be talking about later, to the Macaroni Grill to celebrate Steven's life. And while there, he tried to toast to his dead son, Marie's dead father, but she refused to engage. He even asked if she wanted to go take flowers to her father's grave, and she said, no, I'm over his death and I just want to move on with my life. And she later said of this, quote, "For a long time, I did a good job of pretending it didn't happen. For a long time, I tried not to think about it." So Marie, she's living with her grandpa and his new partner, wife or girlfriend. It wasn't Steven's mom. And I don't know if the two were married, but she's there. She is living her life. She is enrolled in yet another new high school. This time she's in Mansfield High, and she's a senior. And she seemed to be doing really well there again too, right? Her grades were back up. She joined the yearbook and was also the president of the school's National Honor Society and started playing and killing it in volleyball. She impressed all her teachers because she was this new kid who seemed to have this hunger to get involved in anything and everything, from drama to journalism to keyboarding. And again, she was close to old friends. She was well liked, but sort of kept a lot of kids at arm's length. But she did make one close friend at Mansfield, right? And this was a friend who would end up changing her life in a very big way. And this was a girl who ended up being her best friend named Stacy. Marie and Stacy seemed to have a very easy connection with one another. They had a ton in common. They had a lot of compatible interests, and they were just together all the time. They were at school together all the time. They hung out together all the time. They talked on the phone after school, drove around in the car together. They used fake IDs to get into bars. They were particularly popular in one country western bar where the people who knew them there referred to Marie as the cowboy Barbie doll. They were both also writing partners on the yearbook staff, and they just seemed to really enjoy each other's company. They had an easy sort of inseparable love that was bonded deeper by both of them not really having fathers in their lives. For Stacy, her dad was alive, but he was pretty much emotionally unavailable and physically absent. He lived in Mississippi, and when he was around, reports suggest that he was abusive, and this obviously changed the filter with which she viewed the world, and she could tell that Marie had a sort of similar trauma filter. And Stacy later said of this, quote, "I had come from an abused background, and I had been to plenty of psychologists. I could tell that Marie had gone through something too. I thought I could help her come out of her shell, teach her to have a little bit more fun in life. Only what, Stacy didn't know is that Marie's trauma came from her literally murdering her own father. But she did know something was wrong. She could tell that something was weighing on Marie, and she just wanted so desperately for Marie to tell her what it was so she could help her with it. But Marie refused. She would not let her in. And this was frustrating for Stacy because she was the type of friend that one confided in, she was the little therapist. And she just really believed that she could help Marie work through whatever it was that she was dealing with if Marie would just let her in. And one day she would. So picture this. Stacy and Marie being buds, hanging out. They're sitting there and they're reading Hamlet for their English class. And Stacy, she pulls out her cliff notes of the play, right? Or the story. It's a play, but it could have been written as a story. It's been a long time. Have I ever read Hamlet? I don't think I have, but Stacy had and was in that moment. So she turned to Marie and she started reading, quote, Claudius's soliloquy from Acts 3, Scene 3, where research says Claudius was feeling guilty because he had killed his brother, Hamlet's father, to get to the throne, question mark? I am not familiar with Hamlet, please don't judge me. But Stacy said to her friend, and I quote, My fault is past, but oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder. That cannot be since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. Which seems to be him having an attack of conscience and wanting forgiveness or to forgive himself for a murder? Question mark? I could be wrong. That's just my interpretation. But the internet says he was a, quote, erring human being, not an inhuman monster. So, now after reading this to Marie, Stacy thought her friend would be impressed, which I personally am impressed because Shakespearean English is really tough on my brain, and being able to memorize it and then spit out that straight fire is impressive to me. But Marie just seemed to be bothered by it. It seemed to get under her skin and cause an itch that no scratching could satisfy. What she needed to release this itch was instead to expel her demons and confess. Confession! Marie turned to her friend and asked her if she thought it was possible that people could move through the world without having a conscience. Stacy said yes. She said there were many people that moved through the world that she believed who could do terrible things, even commit murders, without feeling bad about it at all. With that, Marie just lost it. She got out of her chair, she backed up into the wall, she slid down and just started crying, making a humongous scene. And Stacy's like, what the fuck's going on? I was just reading Hamlet. So she goes over to her and is just like, oh my God, what is it? What is wrong? And being like a super mature adult, Marie said for her to guess. So she rattled off some things that are totally unrelated to this crime, but are things that would absolutely come to a teenage girl's mind, because murder isn't going to be the thing that comes to a teenage girl's mind when she's wondering why her other teenage girlfriend is so upset. So she's like, are you pregnant? Did you crash your car? Are you failing in class? Etc., etc. And finally getting exacerbated, she's like, oh, you didn't kill somebody, did you? And that's when Marie said, yes, my father. I poisoned him. And later she explained to her friend that she had used something called barium acetate. Now, Stacy, as you can imagine, did not really know what to do in this situation, because what does one do when their best friend in high school tells them that they murdered their father? But she did her best. She did the best that she could to try to console her friend, all while Marie begged her and pleaded with her not to ever tell anybody. She was like, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get caught. Please don't tell on me. And Stacy agreed that she wouldn't. In her mind, the rationale was that you stick by your friend. So that's what she did, at least for a while. Well, kind of. She did tell some friends, because teenage girls are going to teenage girl, right? So she did tell some friends about what happened, but most of them thought that she was just lying or that Marie was just trying to get attention, and they didn't think it was serious. But here's the thing. Her friends were not the only person she told. The day that she found out this information from Marie, she actually went and she told her own mother. Okay, Stacy went and told her mother. Her mother's name was Libby, and she worked in nurse's education, by the way. She told her mother what Marie had told her, and Libby did not believe it. Not that she thought her daughter was lying, but she thought that Marie was lying to get attention and just thought it was nothing. But as time went by and she started to think about it more, she's like, but why would somebody lie to get attention by making up something so horrible? And she started trying to sort of play through the ideas in her head, and she's like, well, if Marie had killed her father, she certainly would be in jail. This is death as natural causes. Like, a 16-year-old girl isn't going to get away with murder. That's crazy. But she couldn't shake it out of her mind. So she's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find out if the poison that she claimed to have used, because, Stacy told her mom what poison Marie said she used. So she's like, I'm going to look it up on poison control, or call poison control rather, and see if that poison could mimic a natural cause of death. And when she called, she was like, oh shit, because the person she talked to said that barium acetate and the symptoms that came along with it, like the poisoning, could imitate a natural death if the doctors didn't know what they were looking for. Now, even though she knew this and her daughter knew this, and they both believed that it was probably true that Marie had done this, Libby decided that she was going to let Stacy take the lead on how she wanted to move forward with knowing this information, which is a choice in my opinion. But she basically said she wanted her daughter to have an idea of what it was like in the real world and to be able to feel the independence of making that choice, to which I say no for a variety of reasons. One, this is literal murder. Like, there's other tests and other circumstances in which you can let your child feel like an adult, maybe not deciding if you should turn somebody in for committing murder. But two, Stacy was struggling, dude. Stacy was handling the fact that she had this information so poorly. Like, she did have a conscience and she was racked with guilt. As time went by and she didn't tell anybody, her stress level got worse and it got worse. She started being too anxious during the day to concentrate and too stressed out to go to sleep. And when she did sleep, she would have stress dreams. She would have dreams of Marie's dad, Steven, calling out to her from beyond the grave, and dreams of Marie herself chasing Stacy through the woods, which sounds terrifying. In these dreams, she said that she could hear Marie breathing slowly and deeply, like she was literally in a horror movie, but then she'd wake up and she'd go to school and sit beside her best friend, and she'd seem like this totally nice, normal person. They'd sit in the yearbook class and they'd talk like nothing had happened, and Stacy would just try to convince herself that her best friend was a good person who just made a, quote, teenage mistake. And the reason I think it's weird that Libby was letting her daughter take the lead on making this decision is the fact that Libby knew that Stacy was struggling. Stacy told her all about this. And you know what Libby did, which I just find to be so strange. I'm sorry, Libby, if you're there, I'm sorry. But something I thought was sort of strange is that she told her daughter a way that she could feel safer, basically, was to lie to Marie and tell Marie that she, Stacy, had admitted to what had happened to a priest. And her rationale for this was that if Marie had actually done this, then her knowing that Stacy had told a priest would sort of make her second guess herself if she was ever to think about hurting Stacy, since Stacy was the person who knew about what happened. To which I was like, I don't know. I've never been in that position, so I don't know what I would do, but I think I may handle it differently. But she said of these decisions, quote, "I wanted Stacy to know that I trusted her to make her own decision about Marie. I guess that I knew that this was the moment in which Stacy was going to have to grow up." But Stacy was going through it. Okay, she was struggling. She was having difficulty in school, where before she had been a really good student. She started drinking heavily. She was doing everything she could to try to just cope with what she knew. And she was also trying to separate herself a little bit from Marie. She stopped, calling her all the time after school, and she started hanging out with other friends at school, and even dropping out of the extracurricular activities that the two of them would do together to make it so she wouldn't have to see her. But still, she couldn't separate herself from Marie entirely, and they would still see each other. They even went to, I don't know if they went to prom together as dates, but they were both together at prom. And there's a photo that they took together at prom after Stacy knew about this murder. And I just remember reading that Stacy looked at Marie that day and was like, wow, she's just so beautiful. It's hard to believe that she ever did anything wrong. Maybe we can just pretend like this never happened and everything can go away. But, it couldn't, right? It did happen, and Stacy could not let her brain she couldn't convince her mind to let her have peace in believing that it didn't really happen. And she even ended up checking herself into an after-school program at a private psychiatric treatment center in Mansfield. She said of this, quote, "I walked in and told them my life was swirling down the toilet." So she tried to get herself help, but it didn't work. This girl had to come clean or she wasn't going to be able to get on with her life. So 8 months after Steven was murdered, Stacy went in and told her guidance counselor what happened. Now, Stacy had been meeting with this guidance counselor for a while prior to this because of the issues she was having. And she had been vague. She hadn't told the guidance counselor exactly what was bothering her. She was talking about Marie, but she didn't get into specifics about what it was, and she didn't mention Marie by name. But her guidance counselor knew that she had this underlying issue that she was dealing with, right? So on this day, finally, Stacy comes in and tells her exactly what's been bothering her, exactly what she knew, and exactly how she found out. And swiftly, the police were called. Now, when police came to take this report, they were skeptical, right? They were like thinking basically, okay, you're saying this and that. I believe that you believe this, but there's a good chance that your friend was lying to you, right? That Marie was lying to get attention because, again, her father's death was ruled a heart attack. But they're like, okay, we're at least going to look into it. And they could look into it because luckily when Steven, well, not luckily because it's unfortunate that he died, but luckily when he died, they retained tissue samples of his, which is great because that means that even after all this time, they could test these tissue samples to see if there was any poison in his system. But here's the problem. They didn't have the tools, the machinery that they needed in order to do these tests. Because remember, this is that really expensive piece of machinery, the chromatography mass spectrometer, which sounds like a sci-fi vehicle one would use to fly into the future, quite frankly. But basically, they needed that in order to do this test, and they didn't have it. But here's the thing, even though there wasn't the machinery like readily available to the doctors and investigators, right, at the time that Steven was killed, when police called and started asking questions to like the doctor's office and the medical examiner, right, asking questions about Steven's death, it did jog the memory of the medical examiner who performed the autopsy, right? Because he's like, I do remember that when I did this, it did seem odd to me that he would have this condition considering how young he was. And since it stuck out as odd, and now they're getting these calls that perhaps there was something more to this murder or to this death at this point, to this death, he's like, oh, now I'm worried that I've made a mistake. And so this doctor made sure to preserve the tissue samples, which by the way, were super close to being destroyed because at this time it had been almost a year since Steven was killed. And I mean, his death wasn't ruled as like anything suspicious. So they don't keep the tissue samples forever. So they were about to be destroyed. The doctor stopped them from being destroyed and took it upon themselves to find this machinery that they needed at like a nearby area, like in a city nearby. Like the closest one that they could use, he located it so they could test this stuff. The problem with this, though, is it took months, okay? It took months for them to track down a machine and then to get the samples over there for them to test them and then for them to do the test and then for the results to get back. In the meantime, though, Stacy and Marie both graduated high school. And because they graduated high school, their friendship sort of dissipated, right? They weren't in a place where they were forced to see each other all the time. And they were both going off to separate colleges. Like Stacy went to a college a couple of hours away. And then Marie used the $60,000 that she got from her father's life insurance policy. And she enrolled in the University of Texas in Austin with the plans to be either a medical examiner or a medical pathologist who would literally be looking at like the tissues of a body, which the irony of that is not lost on me. So months went by, dude. 6 months went by with not hearing anything. So Stacy got to the point where she just figured that the fact that she hadn't heard anything meant that the police had looked into the potential murder story and had come up with the fact that it was a lie from her friend to get attention and that Steven had died of natural causes. But then one day, her phone rings and she's getting a call from investigators who are telling her that that wasn't the case. Instead, they had tested this tissue and found that, yes, he had the barium acetate in his system and he had 250 times more than the average human would have in their system, and this was 28 times more than one would need to ingest to kill them. So with those results in mind, they were now going to be re-looking into this case and looking at it as a homicide, and they wanted Stacy to come down and give her statement. And in response to this, she was so anxious that she left her room, walked to a vending machine near her dorm, and ate 5 Snicker bars in a row. To which I say, relatable. But anyways, on October 18th, 1994, detectives went and arrested Marie at the University of Austin campus, where she was an unassuming freshman. And she was arrested on suspicion of murder, and apparently she immediately, upon being arrested, spilled the beans. About the beans. She really didn't seem to have to be like scared or like pressured into telling the truth. It seemed like it just sort of wanted to spill out of her. So this is what she says happened. She told the cops that she learned about the barium acetate in her high school chem class, okay? She says that her teacher told her all about how dangerous it was and how it could really affect the human body. And so she stole some from her class because they had this on campus. And her plan was to take it and give some to her father just to make him sick. She says she did not want to kill him. She just wanted to make him ill enough that he couldn't care for her because she wanted so badly to be with her mother that she would do anything she could in order to achieve that goal. Now, how did she take this seriously deadly and dangerous, like, chemical from the school without anybody knowing? That's the thing that's insane to me. But she says she literally just waited for her teacher to turn their back and then put some in a paper towel and, like, folded it up and put it in her backpack. She said she brought the poison home and then she and her father were going to have Mexican food that night. So she offered to be the one who plated up their food and brought it over. Once she plated the food, she took some of the barium acetate and she mixed it like into his refried beans. And she said she just put about like an average spoonful, mixed it in. He ate it, and then he left for church. And that's when we know, he started having stomach pain. He came home, and then he died. Now, the officer who's taking the statement is like, oh my God, like, why? I even told my husband about this case. And when I told him, he's like, why? Like, why did she do it? What was wrong with her father? Like, what did he do? Because as people, it's like, ooh, there's something about women, right? The delicate sex, the 16-year-old girl, like, how could she do this? He must have been doing something wrong. But he asked, like, did he hit you? Did he abuse you? Did he hurt you? Like, what happened? And she said, no. She said, there was nothing wrong with my father at all. I just wanted to be able to go home to my mom. Now, even though she was arrested, she did end up making bail after spending 2 weeks in a juvenile detention center. And once she was released, she actually got a job. She got a job while she was awaiting trial. And she got a job at TGI Fridays, the home of the delicious mozzarella sticks. And what's insane about this fact like blew my mind. I don't know how I've never heard of it. Well, I didn't really know very much about this case, but even when looking into it, I only saw this in a couple places. So it's not something that people talk about a lot, but it's something that I want to talk about to you right now. And is that while working at TGI Fridays, there was like a guy who was brought in to make a commercial, right, to like film around the restaurant. And this person saw Marie and thought she was so endearing because she was beautiful and wanted to use her in the commercial, and did. She was in a TGI Fridays commercial. Now, I scoured the internet and I cannot find this commercial, but the fact that it exists out there is wild, especially because Homegirl is out on bail for murdering somebody by poisoning their food and then working in a food establishment and being in a food commercial. That's crazy, no? But anyway, she's working at TGI Fridays. And on the days where she wasn't working herself, she was actually going to work with her mother, Beth, and her mom worked at Granbury City Hall. And this is where her mother had been working since coming back to Texas. Because remember, her mom stayed in Florida. Well, she did end up coming back to Texas. I guess her and Frank were still together, so they moved back to Texas because Frank got a job offer to be like the sheriff of Fort Hood or something like that. So they come back, and now again, Marie got her mom back just like she wanted, but now, it's definitely different circumstances. And when Beth would take her daughter in to work with her, people who worked there were not comfortable with it. Like, they knew who she was. They knew, I'm talking fast, I'm sorry, I know some of you hate that, but they knew who she was. They knew what she was accused of. And Beth was told she needed to like limit the time that Marie spent at the office because people were uncomfortable, which I understand. I mean, people were shocked. This is not the type of murder case that people were used to hearing about. I know because of like covering true crime, and for those of you who watch a lot of true crime, it might seem like kids murdering their parents happens all the time, but parricide is actually incredibly rare. And it's especially rare with daughters. Like, daughters don't typically kill their parents. It just seems like we hear about it all the time because it's so rare that when it happens, it's like incredibly newsworthy and people talk about it. So for Marie to kill her father, who was, by all accounts, a good guy who never abused her and never hurt her, when in most parricide cases, that is the order of operations. The kids are abused, and that's one of the reasons that they go after their parents. For her to just do this with absolutely no reason was completely unusual, so out of the ordinary, and it made people scared. Now, in preparation for Marie's trial, her defense team knew that they needed to sway the court of public opinion. They knew that they needed to get people to see Marie as somebody who made a mistake and not as a cold-blooded murderer, because they were going to try to get a lesser charge of manslaughter. Now, in order for them to do this and win over the public, they wanted to have her do an interview where they could kind of control the narrative and what she said and how people perceived her. And during this interview, Marie said, quote, "I never thought anything through. I didn't realize what I was doing. I knew I had done something very, very wrong, but I did not think of myself as a criminal." And what's crazy is it wasn't just her. Her family didn't really see her that way either. Even Steven's father said, quote, "I know this girl does not have a criminal mind. For reasons only she will know, she committed this one-time act." So that's what the defense was saying. But the prosecution disagreed, and they went out and did their own interviews and gave their own statements to kind of contradict what Marie was saying. And they said that Marie was not like a sympathetic girl who made a mistake. She wasn't somebody who accidentally killed her father. This was a girl who planned to and executed her father's murder. The DA even said that Marie's choice for her future career proved that she was very interested in how people die. They said she was a relentless predator and society's worst nightmare. When Marie went to trial in May of 1996, her defense attorney, which she paid for with the money that she had gotten from her father's death, said that she was not guilty and that her father's death was an accident. They said that she was just a desperate teenager who tried to make her father sick and gave him too much poison, accidentally taking his life. They just said that she was an impulsive, desperate teenager. The defense played a portion of Marie's confession where she told the police that the only reason she put the barium acetate in her father's food is because she thought this was the only way she was going to get to go home and see her mother. And her defense attorney said of this specifically, quote, "She only wanted to make her daddy sick overnight. She only wanted to go home to mama." Which daddy and mama feel like they were trying to infantilize her, make her seem like a little kid when really she was 16 and made a choice. The DA disagreed, though, obviously. The DA was like, listen, they didn't say, listen, this isn't a child, but they implied, like, this is a smart girl. Anybody who's going to school for a medical degree obviously would have over average marks in, like, sciences, right? And they proved this by bringing up her grades and showing that she had, like, straight A's. She knew this information, and she herself admitted that her teacher had explained to her the toxicity level of this barium acetate. They also played a portion of Marie's confession where she admitted that she knew this poison would make him sick and said that she knew the effects of it. She said the teacher even told her that a person who ate this or ingested this would have their throat close up. They also had Stacy testify. Stacy testified against Marie, and when she testified, she told the court that Marie had admitted to her that when she gave her father this poison, she knew it would be fatal. And at one point when Stacy was up on the stand, she and Marie locked eyes, and when they did, Marie just like dropped her head and shook it. Now, what is strange here is that Marie's chem teacher was put on the stand, and she told the court that she never told her students that ingesting this poison could make a person's throat close up. And on the surface, it looked like this was going to be helpful for Marie, like that this information was going to be helpful because, you know, her teacher never told her about this, so how could she know? But what the prosecution did is they flipped it on its head and said, okay, that makes her look even worse because that means that she went as far as looking in to this particular poison to see what the effects were, so she knew what they were and she still gave it to him. And this was especially bad because in Marie's like science class, you know, the class where this poison would have been, there was like an emergency handbook. So you had all the information on certain things in case something happened, right? And the page on barium acetate and what you would do was ripped out. It was ripped out. And the prosecution said that this was just further proof that Marie had looked into this poison and knew how it operated and chose to kill her father. The DA said that Marie knew exactly what she was doing when she poisoned her father. And he said that she just got caught because she got messy. She got messy and she slipped up and she confessed about the crimes that she committed to a friend. Just like Diane Zamora did in last week's episode when we talked about the murder of Adrienne Jones. And if she hadn't slipped up and hadn't confessed, dude, she probably would have gotten away with this because nobody was looking into her. Nobody was even looking into Steven's death as suspicious. The defense, though, disagreed with this and said that she was not a cold-blooded killer. Marie was not a cold-blooded killer and did not know this poison would kill her father. They said that she didn't know much about the poison. If she had, she would have known that by putting that much in, it would have made the food have like a sickly, salty taste, and her father might not have eaten it. But it's like he did eat it, though, so... The prosecution said she gave her father a death sentence and fully intended on doing it, and then added specifically, and I quote, "Just one stomachache wasn't going to get Marie Robards back to her mama's. Steven Robards had to die." The jury was sent to deliberate on May 9th, and if found guilty, she was facing 99 years in prison. That is a long time. So they were deliberating. They deliberated for just about 1 hour before they came back with their decision, and they had found Marie Robards guilty of her father's murder. Next was her sentencing, and the prosecution wanted her to get the harshest sentence and basically tried to tell the jury, like, hey, if you don't give her the harshest sentence and she gets out, she could be serving any one of you your food next. During her sentencing hearing, Marie was put on the stand, and while on the stand, she was asked if she loved her father, and she said yes, very much. When asked if she was sorry she killed her father, she just said over and over, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The prosecution was asking for a life sentence and the defense was asking for just probation, so the jury split the difference. Ultimately, Marie Robards was sentenced to 28 years in prison with the possibility of parole after just 7. Apparently, while in prison, Marie was a model prisoner. One of the very first things she asked once she found out that she was guilty and got her sentencing was how she could go about getting a degree. She wanted to make sure to go to school and make the best of herself, so if she ever got out, she'd be like a model citizen. She volunteered to do the worst chores. She helped whenever she could. She obeyed the guards and all the staff, and she seemed to show remorse. And she didn't even seem to harbor anger towards Stacy. She called her mother in jail every night. And during one of those calls, she told her mom she hoped Stacy didn't feel bad for going to the police. She said she understood why she did it, and she still liked her because, after all, the two had been best friends. While incarcerated, she did an interview with a prison psychologist, and at the time it was like really inclement weather and she was wearing this like really thin outfit, and the psychiatrist asked her like why she didn't ask for something else, and she said that she had no right to complain about anything after all the pain that she had caused. And when her opportunity for parole came up 7 years after she was convicted, she was released, and she went on to live her life, and presumably still lives her life, under the radar. 7 years for committing the ultimate evil. 7 years for killing her father, who did nothing but love her. And that's just crazy, man. Like, we hear about cases all the time where parents are emotionally or physically or sexually abusive, and it's like we get to a point where we can at least understand where somebody's coming from. Even if we don't agree with the actions they make, we can understand how their brain got there. But for Marie, a girl who had no real rage towards her father, for her to kill him is just so hard to like wrap your brain around. It's just impossible. And you know, I actually want to end this video with a quote from Stacy that I think encapsulates my position. I feel like some of your positions about this perfectly. She said, and I quote, "You know, there are times when we all say we hate our parents and wish we never had to see them again. But kill one? Until now, I just never thought it was imaginable." And with that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Steven Robards. I hope that you found it to be informative. I hope I gave you every bit of information you would want on this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for hanging out and remembering him with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Do you believe that Marie Robards intentionally killed her father, or do you think, like she claimed, it was an accident? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I am curious to hear what you have to say. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below with whatever case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you know, or you may not know, I have a long list of cases, and whenever you leave me a suggestion, I put it on my list with your name next to it, so if I cover it, I can give you a shout out, okay? I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage, and I know you're filled with great ideas and great taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell, okay? I put out new videos every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership and a link to my merch store. And if you don't know, now you know that what you're seeing with your eyes and what you're listening to with your ears is now a podcast. True Crime with BRATTERSTEIN, wherever you see podcasts. Right? It'd be super cool if you went, you listened, you liked if you liked it, and you downloaded all the things one does with the podcast. I'm new and I'm trying to get into the algorithm, and I would just appreciate it. But if you don't want to, that's okay. I want to thank you for being here. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. I hope to see you in my next video. And in the meantime, take care of yourself.